Hello guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're all doing well and keeping safe. Going to be speaking about centre-back targets in today's episode of Let's Talk Chelsea. Chelsea continue to be linked with mainly German-based centre-backs or centre-backs playing in the Bundesliga, and it appears, at least to me at the moment, that Chelsea will be signing a centre-back in the summer. What type of centre-back it will be in terms of a young, highly rated centre-back from, say, RB Leipzig, or maybe an older centre-back like Thiago Silva last summer. We'll have to wait and see, but we want to dig into that in today's episode, give you my thoughts on a lot of the links and reports coming out in recent days regarding centre-back targets for Chelsea in the summer. But before we get into any of that good stuff, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also hit the like button if you're enjoying the content, because it helps out the channel as well. So Chelsea are being linked with many centre-backs from the Bundesliga. It's not that surprising given who our new head coach is, with Thomas Tuchel arriving. It appears every day there's a new one. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised, despite him not playing anymore, Per Mertesacker being linked with us, or Mats Hummels being linked with us too, because of course Thomas Tuchel coached him at Borussia Dortmund. But I'm looking at Jerome Boateng being linked with us, apparently agreeing a move to join Chelsea in the summer. I can't see that one happening, and I don't think that'd be a very good move, but there have been pretty legitimate ones that I want to get into in today's episode. In terms of the type of centre-backs Chelsea are going to try and prioritise in the summer, I think there's a gap for me in terms of current targets Chelsea are being linked to. And in terms, we always have to go back to club targets versus coach targets. We've seen this conflict over and over again in terms of what the club actually want, what the current coach actually wants. We'll have to sort of delve into that and try and decipher what that is. I'm sure we won't find that out potentially till the summer, or maybe even beyond that, given Frank Lampard's targets and what actually were his signings. It was hard to decipher and hard to really gauge until he left. But in terms of current targets for Chelsea and who Chelsea could be signing, David Alaba is one of the bigger ones. I've spoken about him a few times on the channel on Let's Talk Chelsea, and I can understand why many people want him. He's an incredible player. Just the pedigree of this player is a bit like Thiago Silva. I think would improve Chelsea's defence. But Matt Law reporting yesterday, along with Thiago Silva hoping to extend his Chelsea stay, Chelsea are put off by David Alaba's wage demand. Matt Law reports that Alaba is set to be available on a free transfer from Bayern in the summer, and Real Madrid are leading the race, but the 28-year-old's wage demands could provide a major sticking point for Chelsea. Telegraph Sport understands that clubs have been informed that Alaba wants to be paid £20 million a year, which is just short of 400 grand a week, and has put off a number of interested parties for the summer. That figure will need to drop significantly for Chelsea to sign Alaba, as it is around 100 grand a week more than top earner N'Golo Kante is currently paid at Stamford Bridge. So crazy demands. I mean, it really is. And I think for a player of that age, I think it is a bit ludicrous, to be honest, especially if Chelsea want to try and sign someone like Haaland in the summer as well. I mean, it's about priority, right? Do you think that spending that much on David Alaba to improve our defence, at least maybe for 1 or 2 seasons, is worth it over signing a player that could be better in the future? We'd have to wait and see. But personally, for me, I think that's just a little bit too much and a little bit too extortionate, given as well how much we paid to bring Thiago Silva in, who's been absolutely incredible for us. So I think that's a little bit too much, which may rule Chelsea out of signing David Alaba, and he may end up going to Real Madrid. But there have been other names as well, along with David Alaba, in terms of players Chelsea could go for in the summer. Miguel Delaney from The Independent linking Chelsea with RB Leipzig centre-back Ibrahim Konate. He claims that not only Man United are in for this player, as well Chelsea and Liverpool are seriously looking at the centre-half too. Konate is 21 years old with 11 caps for France, who is just the latest example of Leipzig's exceptional recruitment. So once again, Upamecano, that was a player Matt Law talked about in his report that I showed you, as well Jose Jimenez, another player that's been linked to Chelsea for quite a few months now. You have to go back to last summer when we were being linked with John Stones as well, and Lewis Dunk and James Tarkowski from Burnley too. So there have been many names touted about. I think the positive thing for Chelsea and for me going into this window with Chelsea in the summer, last summer it seemed like there was a real shortage of quality centre-backs to sign. It feels like we've reached a cycle point now, and you see this, you know, every few summers. Sometimes there's a shortage of good strikers, and then suddenly there's quite a few on the market in the summer, and attacking players and midfielders. Centre-backs, it feels there's going to be many more available potentially this summer for Chelsea to sign. So if we don't sign David Alaba, if he goes to Real Madrid, I think there are other options. Could be Upamecano, could be Konate, as Miguel Delaney states, but I feel another player who's been touted as potentially leaving his club in the summer, and you think about the domino effect of this, if Alaba was to go to Real Madrid, it could mean that Raphaël Varane, a former Chelsea target, and that could be a player Chelsea could prioritise and sign and bring him to Stamford Bridge. Fabrizio Romano was tweeting about this last night and keeping an eye on this contract situation for Varane at Real Madrid, and he could be leaving in the summer. It's not saying he will leave, but there is the opportunity opportunity there and he could be making a move. And it's something that Chelsea, I'm sure, may be monitoring. We hear that a lot with transfers. And I don't think it's a bad move, because for me, when I'm looking at all these links in terms of the gap sort of in age, I mean, it's not massive, but I look at, say, the younger centre-backs, the promising centre-backs like your Upamecano's, like Konate, like other players Chelsea have been linked with in the past, to those older, more experienced centre-backs like David Alaba, like Varane now, like, of course, bringing in Thiago Silva. I'd prefer an older centre-back. I probably wouldn't have said this a year ago, but I think there are several reasons why. Firstly, it's not blocking the path of, firstly, Marc Guehi, but also for Dayot Upamecano potentially at the club too. I feel those two players have big futures. Hopefully at Chelsea. I think it's unlikely both make it at Chelsea, but I prefer us to sign an older player who won't be here for years and years, and you're not investing on a young player, say like we invested so heavily on Kai Havertz. You're sort of making a statement. I think if Chelsea were to sign a player like Upamecano, I think it sends out a very clear message to Marc Guehi, and especially for Dayot Upamecano at the moment, who's at AC Milan. Apparently Milan are quite impressed with him. I think it says to both of them and other centre-backs at Chelsea that this is going to be our man for the next few years if it works out, and I think that's an issue. I prefer Guehi and Samori because I think actually in terms of level, in terms of where they could get to, I'd prefer to see that. So it's why I'd prefer to go to an older centre-back, and I'll keep on getting back to this in terms of my mindset change now with Chelsea in the transfer window. And it probably is exciting for Chelsea fans because I think Chelsea want to win the Premier League next season. I don't think there's any messing around anymore. I think there's been so much clarity in recent weeks of what the club actually want from their manager and what they want in terms of a project, if you can call it that. Tuchel is expected to challenge for the Premier League next season. So whether that's bringing in Erling Haaland from Borussia Dortmund, whether that's bringing in David Alaba, whether that's bringing in a Raphaël Varane. Interesting with Varane, and he's a very experienced player now, and it's crazy to me he's only 27 years old because Chelsea were linked with Varane, as you can see by the graphic that I've put up here in terms of Back to the Future. If you remember in the Jose Mourinho days of 2014-15, we were heavily linked with Varane for a couple of seasons, and I remember a couple of transfer windows, constant links to Varane from Real Madrid, and it seemed like Mourinho really wanted that player to bring him in to improve our defence. It never happened. It's one of those signings, a bit like Thiago Silva. I'm pretty sure Silva was linked with us, in terms of those players that we signed like 6 or 7 years too late. So it'd be pretty typical, a pretty Chelsea thing to sign Varane this summer. But I do think that's an option there for Chelsea to go in for. And I think pedigree, experience, and I think mainly bringing in players who are almost going to give you guaranteed results, or at least give you short-term results. And I think that's what the club are prioritising, right? And even if it costs a little bit more, and if, say, Varane wants to leave and you do have to fork out a little bit more than other players, I think it'd be worth it personally if Chelsea are trying to get back to the top of the Premier League. And I think Football Therapy made this point in the summer when he was on my channel, and I think we were speaking about Ben Chilwell and Thiago Silva and why maybe as you go further up the pitch with attacking players, you can deal with younger players taking a risk there, but it's not as wise taking a risk on younger defenders, bringing them into the league. This is my issue and concern with Upamecano, and wanting a little bit more pedigree and experience in the Premier League and what the Premier League demands of centre-backs. I just wonder, I think there's varying factors here that make me lean in the direction I'd prefer an older centre-back, someone who is in the prime of their career and can adjust very quickly to the Premier League at Chelsea, at Stamford Bridge, and deal with being in the pressure of a title race next season. So I think Varane for me would be one of those top players. Alaba, if he doesn't have crazy wage demands, and that is true, I think it's probably going to rule Chelsea out of that deal. But if those were to drop, trust me, Alaba I think would be a brilliant signing. The versatility of David Alaba, as I was speaking about a few days ago, I think is really helpful for someone like Thomas Tuchel now. I think it opens up a lot of doors. And let me know your opinions. Are there any other centre-backs I haven't mentioned today that you'd like to see Chelsea prioritise in the summer? Let me know in the comments below. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again